Most people believe that if they are good at something, the market will eventually pay them for it. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of how the modern economy works. Having a skill is a prerequisite. It is not a business model. You likely have a professional skill right now. Graphic design, data analysis, writing, project management. And yet, you are still trading 40 hours of your life every week for a single fixed salary. The reason you haven't seen a penny of outside income from that skill isn't a lack of talent. It's a lack of structure. This video isn't going to tell you to hustle harder. It's going to show you the specific gap between having a skill and generating income from it, and how to close that gap without burning through the limited energy you have left after a full working day. Not having a skill doesn't mean you have income from it. That's not a motivation problem. It's not a confidence problem. It's a structural one. And most content about this topic skips straight past it. There are 3 components that have to exist simultaneously for skill-based income to work. Skill is what you can do. Offer is the specific problem you solve for a specific person. Distribution is how that person finds you. Without all 3 aligned, the skill stays dormant, regardless of how refined it is. Most people stop at the first one and wonder why nothing is moving. If you are working a full-time job, your primary constraint isn't money. It's cognitive energy. You have roughly 2 to 4 hours a day where you can perform high-level focused work. Most people waste that window exploring options or learning new skills from scratch. That's a mistake. To generate income within a realistic time frame, you need to start with a skill you already possess. But here is the first friction point. Most people pick the wrong skill to monetize. They pick what they enjoy doing rather than what a specific market is currently struggling to solve. Those 2 things sometimes overlap. Often they don't. Income follows leverage, not effort. 4 hours spent on a skill no one wants to buy produces 0 return regardless of the quality of the work. The shift required here isn't from lazy to hardworking. It's from worker to system builder. There is one step between having a skill and generating income from it that most people skip entirely. They go from "I am a writer" directly to "I am looking for work." That is the fastest way to stay invisible in any market. The missing step is the offer. An offer is not a description of your skill. It is a promise of a specific result for a specific person in a specific time frame. The difference matters more than most people realize. A writer who says, "I do content," is competing with everyone. A writer who says, "I write high-converting email sequences for SaaS companies going through a product launch," is competing with almost no one. Because almost no one has been that specific about the problem they solve. The offer is where most of the real work happens, not in refining the skill further. Once the offer exists, the next decision is which vehicle to use to deliver it. There are 4 realistic entry points for someone converting a professional skill into secondary income. The first is freelancing or microservices. Might you take a specific piece of your existing job, building slide decks, auditing copy, cleaning data, and offer it as a standalone result. Setup difficulty is low. Time to first results is typically 2 to 4 weeks if the offer is specific enough. The trade-off is that income remains tied to hours at this stage. You are trading time for money at a higher rate than your salary, but it doesn't compound on its own. The second is specialized consulting. Instead of doing the work, you sell the thinking behind it. This is for people with enough depth in a specific domain that they can tell a business owner not just what to do, but why what they are currently doing is costing them. The barrier is being able to articulate your judgment as a service rather than a deliverable. The rate per hour is higher, the leverage is moderate. Now the third is productized services. You offer one thing, delivered in a fixed format at a fixed price. Less customization means more repeatability. The mental overhead per project drops significantly once the process is standardized. This model starts to create the early conditions for scaling. because the delivery becomes systematic rather than bespoke every time. The fourth is digital assets, templates, frameworks, guides, mini courses. You build once and distribute repeatedly. This is where the leverage ceiling is highest, but the startup runway is also longest. This model requires either an existing audience or strong platform placement to generate consistent results. It is not the right starting point for most people, but it is the right destination. None of these paths is inherently better than the others. The right one depends on your available time, your skill depth, and how quickly you need feedback that the model is working. At this point, it is easy to feel a cautious optimism about the options. That optimism is reasonable. But there are costs to this that most content skips over, and understanding them now saves significant time later. The first is client acquisition. In a job, your employer is your guaranteed client. In a side channel, you are responsible for finding the person who has the problem you solve, communicating clearly that you solve it, and converting that conversation into a paid engagement. That is a separate skill from the one you are monetizing, and it takes consistent effort in the early weeks. Platforms reduce some of that friction. Tools that streamline outreach can save hours per week, but they accelerate a process you already understand. They don't replace the need to understand it. The second is platform dependency. If your entire income channel runs through a single marketplace, you don't own the business. You are subject to algorithm changes, fee increases, and policy shifts outside your control. Building even a small client list outside of any platform, an email list, a direct relationship, is not an upgrade for later. It is a structural safeguard from the beginning. The third is the energy trade-off. You cannot grind your way to a second income if it leaves you too depleted to perform at your primary job. If the model requires 8 hours of manual output every day to generate $500 a month, the model is broken. The constraint of 2 to 4 hours per day is not a problem to push through. It is a design parameter to build around. Income doesn't come from skill level. It comes from how clearly the skill solves a specific problem. A highly skilled writer producing general content earns very little. A moderately skilled writer who specializes in high-converting email sequences for a specific industry earns a premium. The market pays for specificity and relevance, not raw ability. Skilled people stay stuck earning nothing, not because they lack ability, but because they never made the offer specific enough to be findable. Before choosing a path, run your current skill through 3 filters. The first is the time filter. Does this skill allow for asynchronous work? If the model requires you to be available during hours, you are already committed to your job. It will create friction before it creates income. Must work that can be done on your schedule, delivered on a timeline you control, is the practical starting point. The second is the depth filter. Are you in the upper range of competence relative to the person buying from you? You don't need to be the best in the world. You need to be better than the person who has the problem, and credible enough that they trust you to solve it. Most professionals underestimate how much relative value their existing skill carries to someone outside their industry. The third is the urgency filter. Is the problem you are solving something people need resolved now, or something they would get around to eventually? Skills that address urgent, costly problems, operational inefficiencies, revenue leakage, compliance gaps, command higher rates and shorter sales cycles than skills attached to optional improvements. If your skill passes those 3 filters, the next step is not to launch anything. It is to write the offer. Skill plus market need plus clear positioning equals an offer. Everything after that is execution. The long view on this is straightforward. Skill converts to income when it is packaged as an offer and placed in front of the right distribution channel. That is the first stage, and it is achievable in weeks if the positioning is clear. From there, systems matter more than effort. A repeatable process for finding clients, a defined delivery workflow, a basic follow-up mechanism. These don't require technology. They require intention. Once they exist, on the same hours, produce more consistent output with less friction per engagement. The third stage, converting skill into an asset that generates results beyond the hours you put in, is what most people are aiming for without knowing how to name it. A course, a template library, a consulting framework, a licensed process. These are skill made durable. But that stage is built on the first two, not around them. Stability first, expansion second. The goal in the first 8 weeks is not to replace your salary. It is to prove that your skill can exist outside of your employment contract. Once that proof exists, the path to the next stage becomes a matter of systems you can build incrementally, not a leap you have to take all at once. You are not building an escape plan. You are building an optionality system. When a secondary income channel operates on leverage rather than volume, you stop being entirely dependent on a single source. That shift is quiet. It compounds slowly, and it starts with one specific offer placed in front of one specific person. That is where the work begins.